The notification chimed on my phone as I was driving home from work. I should have waited until I got home to check it. That single moment, that one decision to glance down at a notification, changed everything. There it was, a Facebook tag from Melissa, my girlfriend of nearly 2 years. My thumb hesitated over the screen. Something felt off. Melissa rarely tagged me in anything. I pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store and killed the engine. The late October chills seeped through my windshield as I opened the app, my breath creating small clouds of condensation in the cooling car. The post loaded and I squinted at the screen in confusion. It was a relationship status update, but not the kind anyone wants to see. Finally free from the worst 2 years of my life. Ladies, avoid David Mitchell at all costs. All his confidence is just overcompensation for being terrible in bed. Like embarrassingly bad. Never made me finish once in 2 years. Sure blessed to be moving on. Sure dodged a bullet. The air left my lungs in a single painful whoosh. My stomach clenched so tight I thought I might vomit right there in my car. I read it again and again, each word burning itself deeper into my brain. There were already 17 comments. 17. I scrolled through them with trembling fingers. Girl, we've all been there. Spill the tea, sis. LMAO knew something was off about him. Men really be thinking they're gods when they're barely showing up. My best friend Marco had commented too. What the actual hell, Melissa? I sat there, the phone growing slick in my sweating palm as my entire world imploded. Melissa and I hadn't even broken up, at least not that I knew of. We'd had a fight 3 days ago about her going through my phone again, accusing me of cheating when all she'd found was a work email from my female colleague about a project deadline. It wasn't our first fight about her jealousy, but it hadn't seemed any different from the others. She'd stormed out, sure, but she always came back. Only this time, apparently, she decided to napalm my entire social life on her way out. I finally forced myself to check who had seen the post. 67 people. 67 people had already seen Melissa tell the world I was terrible in bed. My coworkers, my friends, my cousin Ellie, my goddamn bowling league. I felt physically ill as I realized our mutual friends from college were commenting. People I'd known for years. People whose respect I'd valued. My phone started buzzing with incoming texts. Marco first. Dude, WTF is going on? Call me. Then my sister Jenna. You okay? That was a shitty thing for her to do. Then others, people I hadn't talked to in months, suddenly very interested in the drama unfolding on their feeds. I turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with this. Not here, not now, not in the harsh fluorescent lights of a 7-Eleven parking lot with strangers walking past my car. I started the engine with hands that didn't feel like mine and drove home on autopilot. The world around me muted and distant as if I were underwater. The apartment felt cavernous and foreign when I walked in. Half of Melissa's things were gone. She must have come by while I was at work. The framed photo of us in Cancun was missing from the bookshelf. Her favorite coffee mug, the collection of succulents she'd arranged on the windowsill, the throw blanket her grandmother had made, all gone. She'd taken her things, but left the devastation of her public announcement for me to find alone. I sat on the edge of the couch, still in my work clothes, and turned my phone back on. The notifications had multiplied. More comments, more tags, more people weighing in on my supposed sexual inadequacy. Some of Melissa's friends had started adding their own speculations, embellishing her claims with invented details. One suggested I'd never known where the clitoris was. Another joked that I probably lasted like 30 seconds tops. A guy I'd never even met commented, "Men who can't please women shouldn't be allowed to date them." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a crack but didn't break. Part of me wished it had. Maybe then I could pretend none of this was happening. The worst part wasn't even the humiliation, though God knows that was excruciating. The worst part was that it wasn't true. It just wasn't. Melissa and I had problems, sure. Her jealousy, my workaholic tendencies, our different ideas about the future. But our sex life had been good, sometimes great. She'd never once complained. She'd certainly never given me any indication she wasn't satisfied. We talked about what we liked, what worked for us. She'd seemed enthusiastic, responsive. Had it all been an act? Had she been lying beside me all those nights, secretly disappointed and unsatisfied? Or was this just the most brutal way she could think of to hurt me after our fight? I finally picked up my phone and called Marco. Jesus, David. He answered immediately. What the hell is going on? I don't know, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. We had a fight a few days ago. She thought I was cheating because she found some work emails. Nothing major. At least I didn't think so. And she responds with, This. Marco's disgust was evident. That's psychotic, man. She cleared out some of her stuff while I was at work. I guess this was her breakup announcement. That's not a breakup. That's a public execution, Marco said. Have you replied to the post? No. What would I even say? Actually, my ex is lying about my sexual prowess. I'm quite skilled. Thank you very much. That would just make it worse. You could report the post. That's definitely harassment. I hadn't even thought of that. Maybe. I said, though, the damage was already done. Even if the post came down, people had seen it. Screenshots probably existed. The humiliation was out there, spreading through my social circles like a virus. Want me to come over? Marco asked. We can get drunk and burn her stuff. She already took most of it, I said. And no, I think I need to be alone right now. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room for a long time. My phone continued to buzz occasionally with notifications I couldn't bear to look at. Eventually, I went to the kitchen and found the bottle of whiskey I kept for special occasions. This wasn't what I'd had in mind when I bought it, but it seemed appropriate now. I didn't bother with a glass. I took the bottle to the bathroom, turned the shower as hot as it would go, and sat fully clothed on the floor as steam filled the room. The first swig of whiskey burned a path down my throat. The second was easier. By the third, I'd started to cry. Silent, angry tears that mixed with the condensation on my face. How could she do this to me? 2 years together, and this was how she chose to end it? Not with a conversation, not with a clean break, but with a public humiliation designed to do maximum damage. It was cruel in a way I'd never imagined Melissa could be. Had I ever really known her at all? I must have sat there for an hour, drinking and stewing in my misery as the hot water ran out and the bathroom turned cold. Finally, numb from the whiskey and exhaustion, I shed my damp clothes and fell into bed. And the next morning was brutal. My head pounded from the whiskey, and for one blissful moment, I didn't remember why I'd been drinking. Then it all came crashing back. Melissa's post, the comments, the public dissection of my supposed sexual failings. I groaned and pulled the pillow over my face. I had to go to work. I had meetings I couldn't miss, presentations to give. The thought of facing people who might have seen the post made me physically nauseous. But hiding would only make the humiliation worse, make it seem like I was ashamed or guilty. I forced myself through a shower, wincing as the hot water hit my hungover body. As I dried off, I caught my reflection in the mirror, eyes bloodshot, face pale, a man who'd had his pride gutted overnight. I looked away quickly and finished getting dressed. My phone sat on the nightstand, still powered on, but mercifully silent. I turned off all notifications around 3 a.m. after waking up to the sound of it buzzing yet again. With reluctance, I picked it up and opened Facebook. Melissa's post had 87 comments now. I didn't read them. Instead, I went to her profile to see if she'd posted anything else about me. Her profile picture had changed. Now it was her with some guy I didn't recognize, his arm around her shoulders, both of them laughing at something off camera. The timestamp said she'd changed it 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, when we were still together, when she was still sleeping in my bed. A cold, clarifying anger swept through me, cutting through the fog of hurt and confusion. She'd been cheating. That explained the projection, the accusations, the paranoia about my female colleagues. She'd been the one betraying our relationship all along. I navigated back to her original post and hovered my finger over the comment button. I could expose her right now. Tell everyone she was a cheater, that she'd been projecting her guilt onto me. But something stopped me. It wouldn't help. It would just look like petty retaliation, he said, she said drama that would keep the humiliating post alive in people's feeds even longer. And deep down, some part of me still couldn't believe she'd do this. Couldn't reconcile the woman I'd loved with this vindictive stranger who decided to destroy me on her way out the door. Instead, I reported the post for harassment and blocked Melissa on all platforms. It was a small act of self-preservation, the only one I had energy for at the moment. Work was exactly as excruciating as I'd feared. I could feel the stares as I walked to my desk, could sense the sudden hushes in conversations as I approached the break room. No one said anything directly, but I caught whispers, saw the sidelong glances. My colleague Jen, who I'd worked with for 3 years, couldn't quite meet my eyes during our morning meeting. Derek from accounting smirked when I passed him in the hallway. I wondered how many of them had seen the post, how many were now picturing me as sexually incompetent, a joke. By lunchtime, I was ready to crawl out of my skin. I escaped to my car and sat there with the windows up, breathing deeply, trying to calm the mixture of humiliation and rage that threatened to overwhelm me. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister. Facebook took down the post after multiple reports. You okay? A small relief, but it didn't undo the damage. The post had been up for nearly 24 hours. Everyone had already seen it. The whispers wouldn't stop just because the original source was gone. Thanks for reporting it. I texted back. I'm fine. A lie, but what else could I say? That night, I came home to find a small pile of mail on my doorstep. The last of Melissa's things that she'd had delivered. Makeup, a charger, some books, and nestled in the middle, the key to my apartment on a keychain I'd given her for our first anniversary. No note, no explanation, no apology for destroying my reputation. Just the cold metal of a returned key. I left it all in a box by the door and opened another bottle of whiskey. The next few days blurred together in a haze of forced normalcy. I went to work, I came home, I slept poorly, I repeated the cycle. I stopped checking social media entirely. I told myself I was coping, but really I was just going through the motions. A shell of myself moving through required daily tasks, while the real me remained curled in a defensive ball somewhere deep inside, wounded and hiding. It was Marco who finally dragged me out of my apartment the following Saturday, insisting that I couldn't keep living like a hermit because your ex is a psychopath. People have already forgotten about it. He assured me as we sat in a bar across town, far from our usual haunts where we might run into mutual friends. Social media moves fast. There's probably some new drama they're all worked up about now. It's not that simple, I said, staring into my beer. It's not just online. It's the way people look at me now, like they're trying to figure out if it's true, like they're reevaluating everything they thought they knew about me. Marco sighed. Look, man, I get it. It's humiliating, but you can't let her win by destroying your whole life over this. Win? I laughed bitterly. She already won. She nuked my reputation, probably cheated on me, and walked away without a scratch. So what are you going to do about it? Marco asked, leaning forward. Just accept that? The David I know wouldn't just roll over. What am I supposed to do? Post a sexual resume on Facebook? Get affidavits from previous girlfriends testifying to my skills in bed? There's no way to fight this that doesn't make me look pathetic. Marco was quiet for a moment, considering. Maybe not directly, he said finally. But the best revenge is living well, right? You move on, you find someone better, you be happy. That's how you win. I took a long swallow of my beer. I'm not sure I'm ready to date again after this. I'm not saying tomorrow, but eventually. And when you do, you make sure you're the best version of yourself. Successful, confident, all that good stuff. So when she sees you again, which she will because this town isn't that big, she realizes exactly what she threw away. It wasn't bad advice, but it felt hollow. The idea of living well, as revenge seemed too passive, too dependent on Melissa eventually caring enough to notice my supposed happiness. And given how callously she'd discarded me, I wasn't convinced she'd ever give me another thought. Still, as the night wore on and the beers accumulated, a small spark of defiance began to kindle in my chest. Why should I let her dictate how the rest of my life went? Why should I hide away ashamed of something that wasn't even true? The anger that had been simmering beneath my hurt began to crystallize into something harder. Something that felt like resolve. You're right. I told Marco as we left the bar. I need to move on. I need to, I don't know, reclaim my life or something. That's the spirit, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. One day at a time, man. One day at a time. I could do that. I could put one foot in front of the other until the humiliation faded, until people forgot, until I could walk into a room without wondering who was mentally undressing me and finding me wanting. It wasn't a plan for revenge, but it was a plan for survival, and at that moment, that seemed like enough. The universe, it turns out, has a twisted sense of timing. 3 weeks after Melissa's post, 3 weeks of carefully rebuilding my public persona, of forcing myself to socialize normally, of pretending I didn't notice the occasional whispers or knowing looks, I ran into her at a coffee shop downtown. I just ordered my usual when I heard her laugh, that distinctive sound I'd once found so charming. My whole body tensed as I turned and saw her at a table near the window, sitting across from the same guy from her profile picture. They were holding hands across the table, her head tilted back in laughter at something he'd said. For a moment I considered walking out, coffee be damned, but some stubborn part of me refused to be the one to retreat. This was my regular coffee shop, my Saturday morning routine. I wouldn't let her take that from me, too. So I stood at the counter, rigid with tension, waiting for my name to be called. I kept my eyes fixed straight ahead, but I could feel the moment she noticed me. A subtle shift in the energy of the room, a pause in her laughter. I didn't look over. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "David," the barista called, sliding my cup across the counter. I took it with a smile of thanks that felt stretched across my face like plastic wrap. Then, bracing myself, I turned to leave, which meant walking past Melissa's table. I kept my eyes forward, chin up, determined to pass by without acknowledgement. "David?" Melissa's voice stopped me cold. "Hey." Slowly, I turned to face her. She looked good, better than she had a right to, wearing a blue sweater that brought out her eyes, her hair falling in the soft waves I'd once loved to run my fingers through. The guy beside her watched with curious eyes, his arm draped possessively across the back of her chair. "Melissa?" I said, my voice steady despite the rage and hurt churning beneath my sternum. "How are you?" she asked, as if she hadn't publicly eviscerated me just weeks ago, as if we were distant acquaintances making small talk. I could feel the guy sizing me up, probably comparing himself to her description of me as a sexual failure. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. "Never better," I lied. Then, because I couldn't help myself, I added, "Nice post, by the way. Really showed your true colors." Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "I was just being honest," she said, a defensive edge to her voice. People deserve to know what they're getting into. The guy beside her shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting his coffee date to include a confrontation with the ex-boyfriend. "Honest?" I laughed, the sound harsh, even to my own ears. "Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you tried to destroy my reputation to cover up the fact that you were cheating." The color drained from Melissa's face. The guy looked between us, confusion evident in his expression. "I wasn't," she began, but I cut her off. "2 weeks before your post, you changed your profile picture to one with him." I gestured to the guy, who had the decency to look ashamed. "While we were still together, while you were still staying at my place. So don't talk to me about honesty, Melissa." I turned to the guy, who was now staring at Melissa with dawning realization. Good luck, man. I hope you're a mind reader in bed, because apparently she expects you to know what she wants without her ever having to say it." With that, I walked out, the door swinging shut behind me on whatever response Melissa might have attempted. My heart hammered in my chest, adrenaline making my hands shake so badly I nearly spilled my coffee. But beneath the physical reaction, beneath the lingering hurt, there was a small, fierce satisfaction. I'd stood my ground. I'd called her out on her lies. It wasn't revenge, not really, but it was something. A moment of reclaiming my narrative, of refusing to be the villain in her story. Satisfaction didn't last. By that evening, as I recounted the encounter to Marco over the phone, the hollow feeling had returned. "You should have seen his face when I mentioned she'd been cheating," I told Marco. Deer in headlights. "Think they'll break up over it?" Marco asked. "I don't know. I don't care." I said, though that wasn't entirely true. Part of me did care, did want to see Melissa face some consequences for her actions. Even if they do, it doesn't change anything for me. The damage is done. "You need closure," Marco said decisively. "Real closure, not just a chance encounter that stirred everything up again. What I need is for people to forget what she said about me." I sighed. "But that's not happening anytime soon." After we hung up, I found myself drawn back to social media despite my best intentions. I hadn't checked Facebook since reporting Melissa's posts, but now I logged in, a masochistic curiosity driving me to see what else might be circulating about me. Her original post was gone, as my sister had said, but there were other mentions, references and comments on mutual friends' posts. "Did you see what Melissa said about David? Yikes. I always thought he seemed like a selfish guy. Not surprised, TBH. Little digital breadcrumbs of humiliation scattered across my social landscape. I navigated to Melissa's profile, expecting to be blocked. Surprisingly, I wasn't. Her relationship status had been updated to "in a relationship" with the guy from the coffee shop, Tyler Hamilton, his profile revealed. They'd been Facebook official for 2 weeks, which confirmed my suspicions about the timeline of her cheating. As I scrolled through her recent posts, a pattern emerged. Melissa had always been active on social media, but in the weeks since our breakup, she'd become prolific, posting multiple times a day, always with Tyler, always with effusive captions about how happy she was, how amazing he was, how she'd finally found a real man. The performance of her new relationship was almost desperate in its intensity, as if she were trying to convince herself as much as her audience. And then I saw it, a post from 3 days ago that made my blood run cold. when he knows exactly how to please a woman. When a blessed upgraded my life. The comments were exactly what you'd expect. Friends cheering her on, making suggestive jokes, a few oblique references to me as the unfavorable comparison. Tyler had commented too. Anything for my girl? I closed the app, my stomach churning with a toxic mixture of humiliation and rage. She was still doing it, still using my supposed sexual inadequacy as a punchline, still building herself up by tearing me down. And for what? We were over. She had moved on, supposedly to someone who satisfied her in all the ways I apparently hadn't. What did she gain from continuing to mock me? The answer came to me in a flash of insight that was both uncomfortable and clarifying. Power. This was about power. About ensuring that in the narrative of our breakup, she was the one who walked away, the one who had been wronged, the one who upgraded. My humiliation was currency in the economy of her self-worth. And what recourse did I have? None. I couldn't defend myself without looking pathetic. I couldn't retaliate in kind without stooping to her level. I couldn't even confront her without giving her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. Or could I? A thought began to form. Nebulous at first, then taking shape with surprising clarity. If this was about narrative control, about who got to write the story of our relationship and its aftermath, then maybe I needed to seize that control back. Not by contradicting her directly, but by creating a new narrative altogether, one that rendered her claims irrelevant. I needed to flip the script. I needed to reclaim not just my dignity, but my entire sexual reputation. And to do that, I needed someone else. Someone whose word would carry more weight than Melissa's. Someone whose praise would overshadow her criticism. I needed a new girlfriend. The thought was so calculating, so mercenary that I was almost ashamed of it. Almost. But as I sat there in my empty apartment, surrounded by the digital echoes of Melissa's cruelty, shame gave way to a cold, clear determination. She had tried to destroy a fundamental part of my identity with lies. Why shouldn't I restore it with the truth? Because that was the thing. Her claims weren't true. I wasn't some selfish, clueless lover. I'd always been attentive, communicative, focused on my partner's pleasure as much as my own. Previous girlfriends had certainly seemed satisfied. If Melissa hadn't been, she'd never once mentioned it in 2 years together. Never asked for anything different. Never guided me toward what she wanted. If there had been a failure in our intimate life, it had been one of communication, not capability. The more I thought about it, the more resolved I became. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. About correcting a false narrative that was affecting not just my social life, but my self-image, my confidence, my very sense of who I was. I opened my contacts and began scrolling, a plan forming with each passing name. I didn't need to rush into another relationship. That would be transparent and desperate. What I needed was to rebuild my confidence, to start dating again from a position of genuine strength rather than wounded ego. And when the right opportunity presented itself, when I met someone who was compatible and honest and genuinely satisfied by our connection, then the narrative would begin to shift. It wasn't the immediate satisfaction of confronting Melissa directly. It wasn't the quick hit of posting something cruel about her in return. It was a slow play, a long game. But if it worked, it would be far more devastating to her campaign of humiliation than any direct counterattack could be. For the first time since seeing that initial post, I felt a sense of control returning. She had thrown the first punch, but I would decide how this fight ended. The plan started small. First, I needed to reclaim my social presence. I updated my Facebook profile with a new picture, one Marco had taken of me at a company event a few months back, where I looked confident and successful in a well-fitted suit. I changed my status to single, without commentary, letting the simple statement stand on its own. Then I began posting again, not about Melissa or dating or anything that could be construed as a response to her. Instead, I shared updates about work achievements, a weekend hiking trip with Marco, a new restaurant I'd tried, normal, positive life events that painted a picture of someone who was moving forward, unbothered and unbowed. Offline, I started saying yes to invitations I'd been declining since the breakup. Happy hours with colleagues, a birthday party for my cousin, a local charity event where I knew several mutual friends would be present. At each gathering, I was careful to be upbeat but not performatively so, friendly but not flirtatious, present but not trying too hard. I wanted to project the image of someone who had weathered a storm and emerged intact. Not unscathed, perhaps, but certainly not broken. It was exhausting at first, this constant self-monitoring. But as the weeks passed, the effort became more natural. The genuine pleasure of reconnecting with friends and engaging with life began to outweigh the strategic calculations behind each social move. The mask I'd been wearing started to fuse with my actual healing face beneath it. 6 weeks after Melissa's post, I went on my first date, a coffee meetup with a woman named Allie who worked in marketing at a firm that sometimes collaborated with my company. She was smart, funny, and completely disconnected from my social circle with Melissa. We had a good conversation, but no real spark. Still, it was a milestone. Proof that I could put myself out there again, that I wasn't defined by my ex's public humiliation of me. 2 more first dates followed over the next month. One with a woman from my gym who'd been flirting with me for weeks. Another with someone Marco's girlfriend had introduced me to. Neither developed into anything serious, but each one helped rebuild my confidence, reminding me that Melissa's opinion wasn't universal, that I was still desirable, still worth knowing. And then I met Kate. It happened at an industry conference in Chicago. I'd been sent to represent my company on a panel about digital marketing strategies. Kate was moderating the discussion, a sharp-witted woman with auburn hair and an incisive way of cutting through corporate jargon to get to meaningful answers. I'd been impressed by her intelligence and poise during the panel, but it was afterward, at the networking reception, that we really connected. "You were the only panelist who didn't try to squeeze in 3 promotional mentions of your company," she said, appearing at my elbow as I studied the underwhelming selection at the hotel bar. I appreciated that. I turned, surprised to find her there. Up close, she was even more striking. Warm brown eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled. A spattering of freckles across her nose. A confidence in the way she held herself that was immediately attractive. "I figure the best promotion is actually having something useful to say," I replied, though my marketing director might disagree. She laughed, a genuine sound that made me smile in return. "I'm Kate Solomon," she said, extending her hand. "David Mitchell." I took her hand, noticing the firm grip, the way she met my eyes directly. "But you knew that from the panel." "I did," she agreed. "I also know you're based in Seattle, that you've been with your company for 5 years, and that you have strong opinions about data segmentation strategies. Sounds like you did your research before moderating," I said, impressed. "Always," she nodded. "I like to know who I'm dealing with." There was something refreshing about her directness, her unapologetic competence. We ended up talking for over an hour at that reception, comparing notes on industry trends, swapping stories about professional disasters, discovering a shared love of obscure indie films and hiking trails. When the event wound down, exchanging phone numbers felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I'm in Seattle semi-regularly for work," she mentioned as she entered her number in my phone. "Maybe we could continue this conversation sometime without the backdrop of mediocre conference appetizers." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it, more than I had expected to when the evening began. Back in my hotel room that night, I found myself thinking about Kate. Not strategically, not as part of my plan to rehabilitate my reputation, but simply as a woman I'd enjoyed meeting, someone I wanted to know better. It was the first time since Melissa's betrayal that I'd felt that simple, uncomplicated interest in someone new. Kate texted the next morning before my flight. "Good luck with your presentation today. If it's anything like your panel contributions, they'll be taking notes." It was a small thing, that text, but it made me smile. It felt genuine in a way that had been missing from my recent dating experiences. No games, no hidden agendas, just straightforward appreciation. Over the next few weeks, Kate and I developed a rhythm of texting and occasional phone calls. She was based in Portland, close enough to Seattle that when she mentioned an upcoming business trip to my city, suggesting dinner while she was in town felt like a natural progression. "There's a new place downtown that's supposed to have amazing Pacific Northwest cuisine," I suggested. "Interested? Definitely," she replied. Though fair warning, I'm one of those annoying people who asks a million questions about the menu and wine list. "I can handle that," I texted back. "As long as you can handle my completely unnecessary analysis of the restaurant's branding choices." "Match made in marketing heaven," she responded, adding a laughing emoji that somehow didn't diminish the flutter I felt reading those words. Our dinner, when it finally happened, exceeded my expectations. Kate arrived in a deep green dress that complemented her auburn hair, looking confident and at ease in a way that immediately put me at ease as well. The conversation flowed as naturally in person as it had over text, ranging from work to politics, to family dynamics, to favorite travel destinations. She was thoughtful and articulate, challenging my perspectives without ever making me feel judged for them. And there was chemistry, unmistakable, electric chemistry that manifested in lingering eye contact, in the casual brush of her hand against mine when reaching for the wine list, in the way we gradually leaned closer across the table as the evening progressed. "Would you like to get a drink somewhere else?" I asked as we finished dessert, not ready for the night to end. "Actually," Kate said, meeting my eyes with a directness that sent heat coursing through me, "I was thinking we could grab a drink at my hotel bar. It's just a few blocks from here." The implication was clear, and for a brief, sickening moment, Melissa's words flashed through my mind. Her public declaration of my supposed inadequacy, the humiliation that had driven me into hiding for weeks. What if Kate had somehow heard about it? What if I couldn't perform? What if I shut down the spiral of doubt with effort? This wasn't about Melissa. This wasn't even about my plan for redemption. This was about Kate, intelligent, fascinating Kate, and the genuine connection we'd been building. "I'd like that," I said simply. The hotel bar was sleek and dimly lit, with low music that made conversation both possible and intimate. We sat close on a small couch in the corner, our knees touching, the single drink we'd ordered mostly forgotten as our conversation deepened and the space between us decreased. When Kate kissed me, it felt both surprising and inevitable. A soft, questioning press of lips that quickly evolved into something more heated as I responded. Her hand came up to cup my jaw, her thumb tracing my cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. "My room is on the 14th floor," she murmured when we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless. "If you're interested," I was interested. God, was I interested. But a last tremor of hesitation made me pause. "I should tell you," I said carefully, "I'm just out of a relationship. A bad ending. I'm not looking for anything complicated or—" Kate placed a finger gently against my lips, stopping me. "David," she said, her eyes warm with understanding, "I'm not asking for complicated. I'm asking if you want to come upstairs with me tonight. The rest we can figure out as it comes." Her honesty, direct, unashamed, refreshingly adult, dissolved my remaining reservations. This was how it should be between two people. Clear communication, mutual desire, no hidden agendas or unspoken expectations. "Yes," I said simply. "I'd like that very much." What followed was one of the most connected, intimate sexual experiences of my life. Kate was both confident and vulnerable, clearly communicating what she wanted while remaining attentive to my responses. We moved together with an intuitive rhythm that belied our newness to each other's bodies, finding a synchronicity that left us both breathless and satisfied. More than once. Afterward, lying in the tangled hotel sheets with Kate's head resting on my chest, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not triumph, not vindication against Melissa's claims, but simply peace. The quiet satisfaction of a genuine connection, freely given and received. "You're thinking very loudly," Kate murmured, tracing lazy patterns on my skin with her fingertips. I laughed softly. "Sorry. Just processing." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at me, her expression curious but not demanding. "Good processing or bad processing?" "Good," I assured her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Definitely good. It's been a while since I felt this comfortable with someone." Something in my tone must have revealed more than I intended, because her eyes softened with understanding. "The bad ending you mentioned?" I nodded, not quite ready to share the full humiliating story, but not wanting to lie to her either. My ex wasn't kind ... in how she chose to end things. Kate studied me for a moment, then leaned down to press a gentle kiss to my lips. "Her loss," she said simply, and in that moment, I almost believed it could be that uncomplicated. We spent the night together, and in the morning shared room service coffee and comfortable conversation before her business meetings, and my workday pulled us in different directions. As we parted in the hotel lobby, our goodbye kiss held a promise of continuation rather than conclusion. "I'm back in Seattle in 3 weeks," she told me. "If you're interested in doing this again," "I am," I said immediately, then added with a smile. "The dinner and conversation parts too, not just the hotel room." She laughed, that genuine sound that had first drawn me to her at the conference. Good, because while the hotel room was exceptional, I think I like all of it. I walked to work that morning with a lightness I hadn't felt in months. For the first time since Melissa's post, I'd spent hours without thinking about the humiliation, without calculating how my actions might affect the perception others had of me. I'd simply been present, connected myself. It wasn't until lunchtime, as I scrolled absently through my phone while eating a sandwich at my desk, that I remembered my original plan, the calculated strategy to rehabilitate my sexual reputation through a new relationship. The thought now seemed laughably distant from the genuine connection I'd experienced with Kate. Whatever happened with her going forward, I was determined it would be authentic, not strategic. And yet, a small voice whispered in the back of my mind, if things did continue to develop with Kate, wouldn't that naturally accomplish what I'd set out to do? If we became a real couple, if she was genuinely satisfied with our intimate life, wouldn't that itself be the most effective refutation of Melissa's claims? I pushed the thought away, uncomfortable with its mercenary quality. Kate deserved better than to be used as a pawn in my campaign for social redemption. What we'd shared had been real, and I wouldn't taint it by viewing it through the lens of my revenge fantasies. Still, as the day progressed, and Kate's occasional text made me smile at my desk, I couldn't help but notice how differently my colleagues responded to me, the subtle shift in their perceptions as they observed this visible evidence of my romantic success. Derek from accounting, who had smirked knowingly in the wake of Melissa's post, now nodded with something like respect when I passed him in the hallway. Jen, who had avoided eye contact for weeks, stopped by my desk to chat about an upcoming project, her manner easy and natural. Was it my imagination, or had something shifted in how they saw me? Was it simply that my own increased confidence was changing their perceptions? Or was it the tangible proof that another woman, an attractive, successful woman, found me desirable? Either way, I realized with a start, Melissa's power over my narrative was already beginning to fade. Over the next 2 months, Kate and I fell into a rhythm that worked surprisingly well despite the distance between Seattle and Portland. We saw each other every 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes in her city, sometimes in mine, occasionally meeting halfway for a weekend getaway. Between visits, we texted daily and had regular video calls, building a connection that went beyond the physical chemistry that had initially drawn us together. I learned that Kate had grown up in Michigan, the middle child of 3 girls, with parents who'd encouraged her intellectual curiosity and independence from an early age. She'd worked her way through college as a barista, an occasional model for art classes, had briefly considered law school before finding her passion in digital marketing, and had recently started taking ceramics classes as a way to disconnect from screens and engage with something tangible. I shared my own background, my close relationship with my sister Jenna, my parents' amicable divorce when I was in high school, my brief post-college stint trying to make it as a musician before settling into a marketing career I'd grown to love. Gradually, as trust built between us, I found myself opening up about more vulnerable subjects. My fear of never measuring up to my father's success, my struggle with perfectionism, my occasional bouts of imposter syndrome at work. Kate listened without judgment, offering perspective without platitudes, sharing her own insecurities and aspirations with an honesty that made me feel safe to do the same. Our conversations weren't always serious. We had heated debates about movies, collaborated on playlists, texted each other terrible puns that made us both groan, but they were always genuine, a quality I'd come to value above all else in the wake of Melissa's betrayal. The physical aspect of our relationship deepened as well. Kate was remarkably straightforward about desire and pleasure, unembarrassed. The physical aspect of our relationship deepened as well. Kate was remarkably straightforward about desire and pleasure, unembarrassed to guide me when something wasn't working, and enthusiastic in her appreciation when something was. In turn, I found myself more communicative than I'd ever been with previous partners, including Melissa, expressing preferences, asking questions, checking in throughout our intimate moments. The result was a sexual connection that grew increasingly satisfying for both of us, built on mutual trust and open communication rather than assumption or mind reading. I've never had this before, Kate admitted one night as we lay tangled together in my bed, the Seattle rain pattering against the windows. Someone who actually asks what I want instead of just assuming they know. I traced lazy circles on her bare shoulder, considering how to respond without bringing Melissa into our intimate space. I've learned that assumption is the enemy of good sex, I said finally. Everyone's different. What works for one person might not work for another. Kate propped herself up on one elbow, studying my face in the dim light. Someone taught you that lesson the hard way, didn't they? I hesitated, then nodded. My ex, she wasn't honest about what she wanted, then blamed me when she wasn't satisfied. It was the closest I'd come to telling Kate about Melissa's public humiliation of me. I'd mentioned the breakup in vague terms, that it had ended badly, that there had been betrayal involved, but I hadn't been able to bring myself to reveal the full embarrassing story. Kate's eyes softened with understanding. "That's not on you," she said simply. "Communication goes both ways." She kissed me then, a gentle affirmation that somehow meant more than any passionate embrace we'd shared. In that moment, I realized I was falling in love with her, not as part of some calculated plan to restore my reputation, but genuinely, helplessly, for exactly who she was. As our relationship grew more serious, it became increasingly difficult to keep our social circles separate. Kate started accompanying me to work events in Seattle. I met her friends when visiting Portland. Eventually, inevitably, she was integrated into my broader social network, including people who knew Melissa, who had seen her post, who might have formed opinions about me based on her very public accusations. I worried about this at first, afraid that someone would mention the post to Kate, that she would see me differently once she knew how thoroughly I'd been humiliated. But as weeks passed without incident, my anxiety began to fade. Perhaps Melissa's cruelty had made less of a lasting impression than my wounded ego had imagined. Perhaps people had already forgotten. Or perhaps they were simply too tactful to bring it up to my new girlfriend. Whatever the reason, our relationship continued to flourish publicly as well as privately. Kate's Instagram occasionally featured photos of us hiking, attending concerts, or cooking together in my kitchen. My Facebook, which I'd begun using again cautiously, now included her in group shots with friends or at industry events. We weren't performative about our relationship online, nothing like Melissa's effusive posts about Tyler, but we didn't hide it either. I was happy. Genuinely, surprisingly happy, in a way that had nothing to do with vindication or revenge, and everything to do with the woman who now kept a toothbrush in my bathroom and knew exactly how I took my coffee. Which is why, when we'd been dating for nearly 5 months, I decided it was time to tell her the full truth about Melissa. We were spending a weekend at a cabin on Whidbey Island, a getaway to celebrate Kate landing a major new client. The evening was perfect. Dinner on the deck overlooking the water, a bottle of wine, the kind of comfortable silence that comes from not needing to fill every moment with words. "I need to tell you something," I said finally as we watched the sunset paint the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "About my ex. About how things ended." Kate turned to look at me, her expression open but curious. "You don't have to if you're not ready." "I want to," I said, and realized it was true. "I want you to know everything about me, including the humiliating parts." So I told her about the fight with Melissa, about finding her Facebook post declaring me terrible in bed, about the comments and whispers and changed profile pictures that revealed her cheating. I told her about my retreat into isolation, about the slow process of reclaiming my social life, about how meeting her at that conference had been the first time I'd felt like myself again in months. I even told her, with some embarrassment, about my initial plan to find a new girlfriend specifically to restore my sexual reputation, and how quickly that calculation had faded in the face of my genuine feelings for her. Kate listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from surprise to anger on my behalf, to a soft understanding that made my chest tight with emotion. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, processing everything I'd shared. She started, then shook her head. "I can't even imagine doing that to someone, especially someone I'd been with for years. It's so cruel." "It was," I agreed, relief washing through me at her understanding. "And completely untrue," she added, reaching for my hand, in case that wasn't abundantly clear from, the multiple orgasms. I burst out laughing, the lingering tension dissolving into gratitude for her characteristic directness. "That has been noted," I managed to say. Kate's expression turned more serious. "I'm glad you told me. I've sensed there was something there, something beyond the usual breakup stuff, but I didn't want to push. I should have told you earlier," I admitted. "I was just ashamed, I guess." Even though I knew her claims weren't true, shame is a powerful thing, Kate said thoughtfully. "It can make us hide parts of ourselves that don't even need hiding." She squeezed my hand. "For what it's worth, I think you've handled all of this with a lot more grace than most people would have." "I'm not sure about that," I laughed ruefully. "I did spend 2 weeks drinking whiskey in the shower." A completely reasonable response. She assured me with a smile that eased something tight in my chest. Then more seriously, "Does it still bother you?" What she did? I considered the question carefully before answering, not the way it did at first. Honestly, once I met you, it started to feel more like her problem than mine. Kate nodded, understanding what I meant. Some people can only build themselves up by tearing others down. Exactly, I agreed. And I don't want to be like that. I don't want revenge anymore. I just want to move forward. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching as the last sliver of sun disappeared beyond the horizon. Kate leaned against my shoulder, and I wrapped an arm around her, grateful beyond words for her presence in my life. I love you, I said quietly, the words slipping out before I'd consciously decided to say them. I wanted you to know that. Kate turned to face me, her eyes bright in the gathering twilight. I love you too, she said simply, no hesitation in her voice. Later that night, as she slept beside me in the cabin's rustic bedroom, I realized something important. Somewhere along the way, without my noticing, Melissa had lost her power over me. Her cruel words, once branded into my consciousness, had faded to background noise. Overwhelmed by Kate's genuine affection, by my own renewed confidence, by the simple joy of being fully known and loved, anyway, I hadn't gotten revenge. But maybe I'd gotten something better. Freedom from the need for it. City life has a way of circling back on itself when you least expect it. 3 weeks after our weekend getaway, 3 weeks of deepening connection with Kate, of growing certainty that this relationship was something I wanted to build a future around, the universe decided to test my newfound peace. Kate and I were attending a tech industry networking event in Seattle, the kind of obligatory function that's more about making appearances than actual enjoyment. We'd made a game of it, challenging each other to collect the most absurd corporate jargon heard in a single conversation. Leverage synergistic ecosystem solutions was currently winning. When I spotted them across the room, Melissa and Tyler engaged in conversation with a group I recognized from my extended professional circle. My body tensed automatically, fight or flight instinct kicking in before my brain could even process the surprise. Kate noticed immediately, following my gaze to identify the source of my discomfort. That's her, isn't it? She asked quietly, with the blonde hair and the blue dress. I nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to swallow past the knot in my throat. I didn't know she'd be here. Tyler worked in a tangentially related industry. Something in fintech, if I remember correctly. But I'd never encountered him at one of these events before. Melissa's presence was even more unexpected. She worked in event planning, not tech. We can leave if you want. Kate offered, her hand finding mine and squeezing gently. I considered it briefly. Part of me, the part still conditioned to avoid humiliation at all costs, wanted nothing more than to make a quick exit before Melissa spotted us. But another part, the part that had been healing slowly but surely over these past months, rebelled at the thought. No, I decided. This is my industry, my city. I'm not going to hide. Kate nodded, understanding in her eyes. Okay, we'll stay. We'll be civil if we have to interact, and we'll leave when we're ready. Not because of them. The plan was good in theory. In practice, it lasted approximately 15 minutes before Melissa, scanning the room while Tyler chatted with colleagues, locked eyes with me across the crowd. I watched a series of emotions flicker across her face in rapid succession. Surprise, discomfort, calculation, and finally a forced smile as she leaned up to whisper something to Tyler. He glanced over, recognition dawning in his expression, followed by what looked like reluctance as Melissa took his arm and began steering him in our direction. Incoming, I murmured to Kate. Brace yourself. Kate straightened beside me, her posture relaxed but alert. I've got you, she said simply. And those 3 words somehow steadied me more than any elaborate reassurance could have. David, Melissa greeted as they reached us, her voice pitched to sound pleased though her eyes were wary. I didn't expect to see you here. Melissa, I nodded, keeping my tone neutral. Tyler, I turned to Kate, feeling a surge of genuine pride as I introduced her. This is Kate Solomon, my girlfriend. Kate, this is Melissa Chen and Tyler Hamilton. Nice to meet you, Kate said, extending her hand with professional courtesy. If she felt any of the awkwardness crackling in the air, she didn't show it. Melissa shook Kate's hand briefly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. How do you two know each other? She asked, looking between us. We met at a marketing conference in Chicago. Kate answered smoothly. David was on a panel I was moderating. I was impressed by his insights. And Kate was the most competent moderator I've ever seen. I added, smiling at her with genuine warmth. She didn't let any of us get away with corporate doublespeak. Something flickered across Melissa's face. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion at the easy rapport between Kate and me. Tyler shifted uncomfortably beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "So you're in marketing too?" Melissa asked Kate, an edge to her voice that wasn't quite hidden by her polite smile. "Digital marketing, yes," Kate confirmed. "I'm based in Portland, but I work with several Seattle firms." "Long distance," Melissa noted, a hint of skepticism in her tone. "That must be challenging." I felt a flash of irritation at her transparent attempt to find weakness in our relationship. Before I could respond, Kate laughed lightly. "Some things are worth the effort," she said, her hand finding mine. "Besides, the weekends make up for the distance during the week." The implication was subtle but unmistakable. Melissa's smile tightened, her eyes darting from our clasped hands to my face as if trying to solve a puzzle. "How nice," she said flatly. "Well, we should circulate." "It was good name that a good to see you, David." "You too," I lied smoothly. "Take care." As they walked away, Kate squeezed my hand gently. "You okay?" I took a deep breath, assessing. The encounter had been uncomfortable, yes, but not devastating. Not even particularly hurtful. Mostly I felt a strange sense of disconnect, as if Melissa were a character from a TV show I used to watch rather than someone who had once held the power to destroy my self-esteem with a single Facebook post. "I'm fine," I said, realizing with some surprise that it was true. "Actually, I'm better than fine." Kate smiled, understanding in her eyes. She seemed thrown by me. By us, I corrected. She was expecting damaged goods. Someone still reeling from her public character assassination. Instead she got you, looking happy and successful, with a girlfriend who's clearly crazy about you. Kate finished. Not exactly the narrative she was expecting. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had any right to after an encounter with the woman who tried to demolish my reputation. Not even close. We stayed at the event for another hour, mingling and networking as planned. Though I was acutely aware of Melissa's presence across the room, she kept looking our way when she thought I wouldn't notice, her expression difficult to read. Several times I caught her in whispered conversation with Tyler, both of them glancing in our direction. I refused to let it bother me, focusing instead on Kate, on our colleagues, on the comfortable professional identity I'd rebuilt for myself in the months since Melissa's betrayal. When we finally left, stepping out into the cool Seattle evening, Kate turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know what I just realized?" she said, linking her arm through mine. "You won." I raised an eyebrow, confused. "Won what?" "The whole situation with Melissa," Kate explained. "She tried to humiliate you, to make you small. But look at you now, successful, happy, moving forward. While she's still defining herself by her relationship to you, still needing to compare, still bringing up the past. You've moved on." She hasn't. Her words crystallized something I'd felt but hadn't fully articulated, even to myself. It was true. Somewhere along the way, without revenge or retaliation, I had reclaimed my narrative. The story Melissa had tried to write about me, the sexually incompetent ex-boyfriend, the humiliated victim, no longer fit the man I'd become. "I guess you're right," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "Of course I am," Kate replied with typical confidence. "I'm very smart. It's one of the many reasons you love me." I laughed, pulling her closer. "One of many," I agreed. We were halfway home when my phone buzzed with a notification. I ignored it, not wanting to interrupt the comfortable silence that had settled between us. It buzzed again a few minutes later, and then again. "Someone really wants your attention," Kate noted as we pulled into the parking garage of my apartment building. I sighed, pulling out my phone once I'd parked. "Probably work. There's a campaign launching next." I stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen in disbelief. "What is it?" Kate asked, concern in her voice. "It's Marco," I said, still processing what I was seeing. "He says Melissa just made a Facebook post about seeing us tonight." "About me and you?" Kate's eyebrows shot up. "Seriously?" "What did she say?" I opened the messages from Marco. "Dude, check FB. Melissa's having some kind of meltdown about you and your new girlfriend." The second message contained a screenshot. Melissa's post was a paragraph long, dripping with false concern and thinly veiled bitterness. "Saw my ex tonight with his new girlfriend. Hoping she knows what she's getting into. Some men never change. They just find new women to manipulate. To be sure, just saying, trust your instincts." The third message from Marco was simply, "She's losing it, man. Everyone can see through this." I handed my phone to Kate, who read the messages with increasing incredulity. She's still trying to paint you as the villain, Kate said, shaking her head. Even after seeing us together, seeing how happy you are, she just can't let it go. Apparently not. I agreed, feeling a strange mixture of irritation and pity. What kind of person needed to continue a character assassination campaign 6 months after a breakup? Are you going to respond? Kate asked, handing my phone back. I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No, there's nothing to gain. Anyone who knows me knows it's bullshit. Anyone who doesn't matter, Kate finished, understanding exactly what I meant. We went upstairs to my apartment, the encounter with Melissa and her subsequent post casting a slight shadow over what had otherwise been a good evening. I tried to shake it off, reminding myself of what Kate had said earlier, that I'd already won by moving on, by being happy. Still, as we got ready for bed, I couldn't help checking Facebook again, curious despite myself about the response to Melissa's post. What I found surprised me. Unlike her original post about my supposed sexual inadequacy, which had garnered supportive comments and sympathetic reactions, this one was being met with skepticism and even direct pushback. Marco had commented, "Maybe consider that he's happy and moved on, and you should too." A mutual friend named Rachel, who had liked Melissa's original cruel post, now wrote, "This seems unnecessary, Mel. It's been months." Others expressed similar sentiments, gentle but firm suggestions that Melissa was the one who needed to move on, that continuing to publicly disparage an ex was not a good look, that perhaps her concern was more about her own feelings than any genuine worry for Kate. Even more telling were the reactions from people who had seen Kate and me together at the networking event. A colleague named James had commented, "I just met David's girlfriend tonight. They seem great together. Maybe it's time to let this go?" I showed the post to Kate, who read through the comments with a thoughtful expression. "The tide has turned," she observed. "People see through her now." "Looks that way," I agreed, feeling a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. I hadn't wanted a public reckoning from Melissa. I just wanted to move on, to rebuild my life without her shadow hanging over it. But perhaps this was an inevitable part of that process, the social ecosystem correcting itself, recognizing toxic behavior for what it was. Kate set my phone aside, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Let's forget about this," she suggested. "It's her issue, not ours." She was right, of course. We went to bed, making love with the sweet familiarity of established partners who still delight in each other's bodies, who know what brings pleasure and aren't afraid to ask for it. Afterwards, as Kate drifted to sleep beside me, I found myself thinking about the strange circularity of the situation. Melissa had tried to destroy me by attacking my sexual prowess, by painting me as selfish and incompetent in the most intimate realm of human connection. Yet here I was in a relationship characterized by mutual satisfaction, open communication, and genuine love. Everything she had implied I was incapable of providing. The ultimate refutation of her lies wasn't a counterattack or public defense. It was simply living well, loving well, being the person I'd always been despite her attempts to redefine me. The social media controversy sparked by Melissa's bitter post about seeing Kate and me together might have faded into digital obscurity, just another blip in the constant stream of online drama, if not for what happened the following week. I was presenting a new campaign strategy to our biggest client, focused on leveraging user-generated content across multiple platforms. The presentation was going well. The clients were engaged, asking good questions, clearly receptive to our approach. As I wrapped up the formal portion and opened the floor for discussion, my phone vibrated in my pocket with an incoming call. I ignored it, of course, maintaining eye contact with the client team. It vibrated again almost immediately, and then a third time. Whoever was calling was persistent enough that I began to worry it might be an emergency. During a brief pause while the clients conferred among themselves, I discreetly checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Marco, followed by a text that simply read, "Call me ASAP. Fur, Facebook. KATE. My stomach dropped. What was happening now? Had Melissa escalated her campaign against me? Had she somehow dragged Kate further into this mess? "Excuse me for just one moment," I said to the clients, forcing a professional smile. "Please continue discussing among yourselves. I'll be right back." I stepped into the hallway and called Marco immediately. "What's going on?" I demanded as soon as he answered. "Dude," Marco said, an odd note in his voice that I couldn't quite identify. "Have you seen Kate's Facebook post?" "No," I said, anxiety mounting. "I've been in a client meeting all morning." What happened? Did Melissa? It's not about Melissa, Marco interrupted. At least not directly. Man, just check it. Now. It's blowing up. I ended the call and quickly opened Facebook, navigating to Kate's profile with growing apprehension. Her most recent post was from an hour ago, and it already had over 100 reactions and dozens of comments. My eyes widened as I began to read. I try to keep my personal life offline, but sometimes a public response is needed to counter public misinformation. 6 months ago, my boyfriend's ex decided to publicly humiliate him with false claims about his abilities as a partner. Claims that said more about her own inability to communicate than about him. Since then, I've watched him handle this situation with remarkable grace, refusing to engage in petty retaliation even when opportunities presented themselves. He chose the high road while she continued trying to tear him down. So let me set the record straight. David Mitchell is the most attentive, communicative, and satisfying partner I have ever had. The problem was never his performance. It was her dishonesty and lack of communication. To women everywhere, if you're unsatisfied in your relationship, speak up. Guide your partner. Communicate your needs. Don't lie for years and then publicly shame someone for not reading your mind. And to my incredible boyfriend, I love you, I see you, and I appreciate every aspect of who you are, especially your generosity as a partner in all areas of our relationship. Your communication is sexy and the shaming. I stared at the screen in shock, reading and rereading Kate's words as heat rose to my face. She had publicly defended me, not just my character, but specifically the sexual prowess that Melissa had tried to demolish. And she'd done it without my knowledge or prompting, out of what appeared to be genuine indignation on my behalf. My phone began buzzing with notifications as mutual friends tagged me in comments on Kate's post or sent private messages. I ignored them all, scrolling through the comments to gauge the reaction. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Friends and colleagues expressed support, praised Kate's directness, and condemned Melissa's original cruelty. Several women commented about the importance of communication in relationships, agreeing with Kate's central point. A few people I barely knew confessed they'd always thought Melissa's claims seemed suspect given the timing of her new relationship. One comment in particular caught my eye. From Rachel, the mutual friend who had initially supported Melissa, but recently seemed to be reevaluating that stance. I'll be honest, I believed Melissa at first because she's my friend. But the way she's continued this campaign months later while David has stayed quiet made me question things. Seeing him with Kate at events, how genuinely happy they seem. It doesn't match the narrative Melissa was pushing. Thank you for speaking up, Kate. There were a few supportive comments for Melissa too, mostly from her closest friends, but they were notably in the minority and seemed defensive rather than convincing. My head was spinning. I needed to get back to my client meeting, but I couldn't focus. Kate had just publicly declared not only her love for me, but her satisfaction with our sex life, directly refuting the humiliation Melissa had tried to inflict. It was the most effective response possible, not angry denial from me, which would have seemed defensive, but confident affirmation from a new partner with no reason to lie. I sent Kate a quick text. Just saw your post. In a client meeting. Call you as soon as I'm done. Her response came immediately. Hope you're not upset. Couldn't stand by anymore after her latest post. Love you. Upset? I almost laughed out loud in the hallway. I felt many things in that moment. Shock, gratitude, a surge of love for Kate's fierce loyalty, and yes, a certain vindication that I'd never actively sought, but couldn't help feeling now that it had arrived. But upset wasn't among them. Not upset, overwhelmed in the best way. Love you too. Talk soon. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and returned to the client meeting, somehow managing to focus on their questions and concerns, despite the emotional earthquake that had just occurred in my personal life. By some miracle, the presentation concluded successfully, with the clients enthusiastic about moving forward with our strategy. As soon as they left, I closed my office door and called Kate. Hey, she answered, a hint of nervousness in her voice. So I did a thing. I said, still processing. Kate, I don't even know what to say. Are you mad? She asked directly. I know I should have checked with you first, but after seeing her post about us and knowing how hard you've worked to take the high road, I just couldn't stay silent anymore. I'm not mad, I assured her. Honestly, I'm touched. No one's ever defended me like that before. It was all true, Kate said simply. Every word. She tried to humiliate you with lies. I countered with the truth. Something about the straightforward justice of it, the perfect symmetry of the response made me laugh. A genuine, relieved sound that released months of tension I hadn't even realized I was still carrying. Do you have any idea how many messages I've gotten? I asked her. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since I saw your post. Mine either, Kate admitted. I didn't expect it to blow up like this. I thought maybe a few friends would see it. Maybe Melissa would get the message and finally move on. I think a few more than that saw it, I said dryly. Marco called me 3 times in a row to make sure I knew about it. Kate groaned. I'm sorry if this made things complicated for you. Don't apologize, I interrupted. Not for this. Never for this. You stood up for me in exactly the way I couldn't stand up for myself. I paused, searching for the right words. That's one of the most loving things anyone has ever done for me. There was a smile in Kate's voice when she responded. Well, get used to it. I plan to keep standing up for you for a very long time. The promise in those words, casual as they were, sent a wave of emotion through me so powerful I had to sit down. We'd never explicitly discussed the long-term future, though I'd been thinking about it more and more in recent weeks. Hearing Kate casually reference a shared future, one where she continued to stand by me, to defend me when needed, felt like the final piece of something important falling into place. I love you, I told her, the words inadequate for the depth of what I was feeling, but the best I had to offer. I'll be in Portland this weekend. We'll celebrate properly then. I love you too, she replied, and I'll hold you to that celebration. After we hung up, I finally allowed myself to look through the messages that had been flooding in since Kate's post went viral among our social circles. They ranged from supportive friends offering validation to acquaintances expressing newfound respect. From colleagues tactfully acknowledging they'd seen both posts to a few brave souls admitting they'd misjudged the situation based on Melissa's claims. Nowhere among them was a message from Melissa herself. I wondered what she was thinking, how she was reacting to this public counter-narrative that so effectively neutralized her attempt at character assassination. Part of me, a small, still wounded part, hoped she was embarrassed, even humiliated by the exposure of her cruelty. But mostly I just felt free. Free from the shadow her public shaming had cast over my life. Free from the lingering doubt that perhaps some people would always see me through the lens of her lies. Kate had given me that freedom, not by attacking Melissa, but by simply speaking her truth. Our truth, with the same directness and honesty that characterized every aspect of our relationship. By the time I left work that evening, Kate's post had been shared dozens of times and had accumulated over 500 reactions. The court of public opinion, which had once convicted me based on Melissa's testimony alone, had reopened the case and reversed its judgment. But more importantly, I no longer cared about its verdict. The people who mattered knew the truth. I knew the truth. That was enough. 2 days after Kate's post, as the social media storm was beginning to die down, I received an unexpected message from Tyler. It was brief and awkwardly worded. David, I think we should talk. Not online. In person. Let me know if you're willing. Tyler. My first instinct was to ignore it. What could Tyler possibly have to say that would be worth my time? He was Melissa's new boyfriend, the man she cheated on me with, someone I had no relationship with beyond a few uncomfortable encounters. But curiosity got the better of me. After consulting with Kate, who advised caution but agreed the request was intriguing, I suggested meeting Tyler at a quiet bar downtown after work. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a half-empty beer in front of him. He looked different than he had at the networking event. More subdued, perhaps, less polished. He stood as I approached, extending his hand in an awkward greeting. Thanks for coming, he said as we sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I admitted. But I'll admit I'm curious about what was important enough to warrant this meeting. Tyler took a long swallow of his beer, seemingly gathering his thoughts. First, I want to say I didn't know about you and Melissa when we started seeing each other, he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. She told me you two had broken up weeks before we got together. Funny, I said dryly. She neglected to tell me you existed at all until after she'd publicly humiliated me and cleared out her things from my apartment. Tyler winced. Yeah, I figured that out eventually. After I saw the dates on some of her texts and photos, he paused, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I'm not here to defend her behavior. What she did to you was wrong. The post, the lies, all of it. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by his directness. You think they were lies? I know they were, he said firmly. That's partly why I wanted to talk to you. Melissa and I broke up 2 days ago. This was unexpected. I'm sorry to hear that, I said automatically, though I wasn't entirely sure I meant it. Tyler let out a humorless laugh. Don't be. It was long overdue. He hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. The truth is, our relationship has been rocky almost from the start. She's extremely critical. Nothing I do is ever good enough, including ironically in bed. The irony wasn't lost on me. I remained silent, letting him continue. After your girlfriend's post went viral, Melissa was furious, ranting about how you two were trying to publicly humiliate her, how everyone was taking your side, how unfair it all was. Tyler shook his head. But the thing is, I'd read both posts, and Kate's rang true to me because Melissa does the same thing to me that she apparently did to you. Never tells you what she wants, then gets angry when you don't magically provide it, I guessed. Tyler nodded, relief evident in his expression at being understood. Exactly. It's like she expects me to read her mind, then punishes me when I can't. And she's so convincing when she's upset that I started to believe maybe I really was terrible, you know? Maybe I really was the problem. I knew exactly what he meant. I'd experienced the same self-doubt, the same erosion of confidence under Melissa's particular brand of criticism. Before I could respond, Tyler continued. When I saw how happy you seemed with Kate, how she defended you, it made me realize something wasn't adding up. If you were really this selfish, awful guy Melissa described, how could you have moved on to what was clearly a healthy, loving relationship? Meanwhile, I was stuck in the same toxic pattern Melissa had apparently been in with you. So you broke up with her? I concluded. Not immediately, Tyler admitted. First, I tried talking to her about it, suggested we work on our communication, especially about intimacy. But she got defensive, said I was attacking her, turned it all around so somehow I was the villain for even bringing it up. He shrugged. That was when I knew it would never change. So yes, I ended things. I sat back, processing this unexpected turn of events. There was a certain poetic justice in Melissa's new relationship collapsing partly because of the very public attack she'd launched against me. But more than schadenfreude, what I felt was a strange kinship with this man who had unwittingly stepped into the same emotional minefield I'd navigated for 2 years. Why tell me all this? I asked finally. We're not friends. You don't owe me an explanation about your relationship. Tyler considered the question, turning his beer glass slowly between his hands. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Partly to apologize, I guess, for my role in hurting you, even though I didn't know the full story at the time. Partly because I thought you deserved to know that other people can see through her now. And partly, he hesitated, looking slightly embarrassed. Partly because I wanted to thank you. Thank me? I echoed, confused. For what? For showing me it was possible to get out, to move on, to find something healthier? He said simply. Seeing you with Kate made me realize I didn't have to accept being made to feel inadequate all the time. A strange warmth spread through my chest. Not triumph or vindication, but something quieter, more profound. The idea that my journey of recovery from Melissa's betrayal had inadvertently helped someone else find their own path to healing felt like the closing of a circle, a restoration of balance I hadn't known I needed. Well, I said finally, raising my glass in a small toast. Here's to moving on. Tyler clinked his glass against mine. To moving on, he agreed. We didn't stay much longer after that. There wasn't much else to say, and the brief connection we'd formed, two survivors of the same emotional hurricane, didn't quite translate to friendship. But as we parted ways outside the bar, I felt a peculiar sense of completion, as if the final piece of a complex puzzle had just fallen into place. I called Kate on my way home, relating the strange meeting and Tyler's unexpected revelations. So Melissa's single again, she noted when I finished. Just when her campaign against you has been thoroughly discredited. Poetic timing, I agreed. Do you think she'll try to contact you? Kate asked, a note of concern in her voice. I considered the question as I waited for a stoplight to change. I don't think so. She has too much pride. Besides, there's nothing she could say at this point that would matter. Good, Kate said firmly. Because you've moved so far beyond that relationship, beyond her petty attempts to tear you down. The light turned green, and I accelerated through the intersection, feeling the truth of Kate's words in every fiber of my being. I had moved beyond Melissa, beyond the hurt, beyond the humiliation, beyond even the desire for revenge that had initially driven my recovery. You know, I said thoughtfully, when she first posted that awful thing about me, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine ever recovering from that kind of public humiliation. And now, Kate prompted, now I realize it was actually the beginning, not the end. I said, surprising myself with the clarity of this insight. The beginning of understanding what I really want in a relationship. The beginning of learning to value myself regardless of someone else's opinion. The beginning of finding you. Kate was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft with emotion. I'm glad her cruelty led you to me, but I'm even more glad you were stronger than she expected. That you didn't let her define you. I almost did, I admitted. For a while there, I was rebuilding myself specifically to prove her wrong. But somewhere along the way, somewhere around the time I met this amazing woman at a conference in Chicago, it stopped being about Melissa's lies and started being about my truth. That's the best revenge, Kate said. Not proving her wrong, but living your truth so completely that her opinion becomes irrelevant. She was right, of course. The revenge I'd initially craved, public vindication, the exposure of Melissa's lies, the restoration of my reputation, had come in the end, but not in the way I'd imagined. It had come naturally as a byproduct of building a genuine connection with someone who saw me clearly and loved what she saw. It had come not through my calculated efforts, but through Kate's spontaneous defense, through Tyler's belated recognition, through the gradual shifting of social perception as the truth became evident over time. But more importantly, I no longer needed that external validation. The internal wounds Melissa's cruelty had inflicted had healed, not because I'd proven her wrong, but because I'd remembered who I was outside of her narrative. I'd reclaimed not just my sexual confidence, but my entire sense of self, rebuilt from the inside out through honest connection rather than defensive posturing. As I pulled into my apartment parking garage, I felt a sense of profound gratitude for Kate's fierce loyalty, for the friends who had stood by me, even for the painful journey that had led me here, to this moment of clarity and contentment I might never have found without first experiencing its opposite. I love you, I told Kate, the simple words carrying the weight of everything I couldn't fully articulate. See you this weekend? I'll be waiting, she promised. And David, I'm proud of you. 3 words that healed more than she could possibly know. Epilogue: 1 year after Melissa's fateful Facebook post, Kate and I stood together on the balcony of our new apartment, a spacious 2-bedroom in a neighborhood halfway between Seattle and Portland, allowing both of us to commute to our respective offices when necessary while working remotely the rest of the time. The compromise location had been Kate's idea, a practical solution to the geographic challenge that had characterized the early months of our relationship. Happy anniversary, Kate said, handing me a glass of champagne as we looked out over the twinkling city lights below. Is it technically our anniversary? I asked with a smile. We never did agree on an official start date. Kate pretended to consider this. First meeting? First kiss? First time I defended your sexual prowess on social media? So many options. I laughed, pulling her close with my free arm. I'm partial to that last one, personally. Nothing says we're officially a couple like a viral Facebook post about your boyfriend's talents in bed. One of my finer moments, she agreed with a mischievous grin, though I stand by every word. We clinked glasses and sipped our champagne, comfortable in the momentary silence. Below us, the city hummed with Saturday night energy. Restaurant patios filled with diners, couples strolling along the waterfront, music drifting up from a nearby bar. Our life together had developed its own comfortable rhythm over the past year. Challenging work weeks punctuated by weekend adventures, quiet evenings of parallel productivity followed by passionate reconnection, the gradual intertwining of our social circles and family relationships into a shared network of support. I saw Melissa last week, I said casually, breaking the silence. At that coffee shop downtown where I ran into her and Tyler last year. Kate raised an eyebrow, interested but not concerned. How was that? Surprisingly, normal, I admitted. We nodded at each other, did that awkward half-wave thing, and went about our business. No drama. Progress, Kate noted. For both of you, probably. She was right. In the years since Tyler had broken up with her, Melissa had maintained a relatively low profile, at least in relation to me. Mutual friends reported she'd been seeing a therapist, had taken a break from dating to focus on herself, had even apologized to a few people for involving them in what she now referred to as her post-breakup meltdown. I'd never received a direct apology, nor had I expected one. Some bridges once burned aren't meant to be rebuilt, and that was okay. You know what's strange? I mused, watching the condensation gather on my champagne flute. Sometimes I almost feel grateful for what happened. Not for the humiliation or the cruelty, but for the chain of events it set in motion. If she hadn't posted that awful thing, I might never have met you. Kate considered this, her head tilted thoughtfully. I think we would have found each other eventually, she decided. But maybe we wouldn't have appreciated what we have quite as much. Either way, I said, setting down my glass to take both her hands in mine, I wouldn't change where we are now. Not for anything. Kate smiled, squeezing my hands gently. Neither would I. I took a deep breath, suddenly nervous despite the months of planning that had led to this moment. Actually, I said, there is one thing I'd like to change. Before Kate could ask what I meant, I released her hands and reached into my pocket, withdrawing the small velvet box I'd been carrying for days, waiting for the perfect moment. Her eyes widened as I dropped to one knee on our balcony, the city lights creating a perfect backdrop for the question I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Kate Solomon, I began, my voice steadier than I'd expected given the hammering of my heart. You walked into my life when I was at my lowest point and showed me what real partnership looks like. You've defended me, challenged me, believed in me, and loved me with a generosity I didn't know was possible. You've taught me that honest communication is the foundation of everything good between two people. I opened the box, revealing the emerald ring I'd chosen because it reminded me of her eyes in certain light. Will you marry me? Kate's expression shifted from surprise to joy, her eyes bright with unshed tears. Yes, she said without hesitation. Absolutely yes. As I slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, my fiancé, my defender, my partner in all things, I felt the last lingering shadow of Melissa's cruelty dissolve completely. The woman who had tried to define me through humiliation had instead set me on the path to finding someone who saw me clearly and loved what she saw. It wasn't the revenge I'd originally wanted. It was something infinitely better. A life rebuilt not on bitterness or retaliation, but on honest connection, mutual respect, and the kind of love that makes past hurts irrelevant in the light of present joy. Later that night, as Kate slept beside me, her head on my chest and her newly adorned hand resting over my heart, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. From public humiliation to private contentment, from wounded ego to genuine self-knowledge, from a relationship built on unspoken expectations to one founded on clear communication and mutual satisfaction. Melissa had told everyone I was bad in bed. Kate had announced how amazing I was. But the truth, the real truth, was that neither public declaration defined me. What defined me were the choices I'd made in the aftermath of betrayal. To heal rather than fester, to seek connection rather than isolation, to build rather than destroy. As I drifted toward sleep, Kate's steady breathing a counterpoint to my own, I felt gratitude wash through me. Not just for the woman in my arms, but for the man I'd become on my way to finding her. A man who had learned, through pain and recovery, that the most eloquent response to cruelty is not revenge, but resilience. Not retaliation, but renewal. A man who had, in the end, found the best revenge of all, a life well lived, with someone who made every moment of that life sweeter for her presence in it.